December 1958. Western Nebraska. The storm started before dark. By midnight, an old farm truck sat buried beside Route 92 with one dim parking light still glowing through the snow. Inside the truck, a farmer tried to stay alive beside his dog, while the temperature kept falling. Then another truck stopped behind him, and a tall man in a heavy coat stepped out into the blizzard and knocked on the frozen window. If stories like this still mean something to you, subscribe now and tell me where you're watching from tonight. I always like seeing how far these old stories travel. The farmer's name was Earl Bennett, 53 years old, wheat farmer cattleman born on the same Nebraska ground. His father worked before the First War. Earl lived alone outside Scottsbluff after his wife, Martha, died during a hard winter 4 years earlier. After that, people noticed he talked less. He still came into town every Thursday morning for feed and coffee, but conversations with Earl never lasted long anymore. The only thing that still went everywhere with him was a yellow farm dog named Rusty had wandered onto Earl's property during harvest season years earlier and never left folks around Scottsbluff. Joked that the dog understood Earl better than most people did that December night. Earl had stayed late helping another rancher save a calf during the storm west of town. By the time he finally headed home, the snow was already crossing the highway sideways. Wind hammered the truck hard enough to shake the doors. Somewhere near mile marker 11, the old Chevy sputtered once and died. Earl tried twice to restart it before the battery finally gave up beneath the cold, so he wrapped his canvas coat tighter around himself, pulled Rusty close against his chest for warmth, and decided to wait for daylight outside. The temperature kept dropping. Snow drifted halfway up the tires. Most men out there knew stories about farmers freezing inside stalled trucks during Nebraska winters. Around 1 in the morning, another pair of headlights appeared through the storm long black Cadillac California plates. The driver slowed after spotting the truck beside the road. For a moment, the Cadillac simply idled there while snow swept across the windshield. Then the driver opened the door and stepped into the storm-tall man, broad shoulders, heavy shearling coat, cowboy boots disappearing into snowdrifts. He walked to Earl's truck and knocked twice on the frozen window. Earl stirred slowly while Rusty barked once beside him. The stranger leaned. "Closer? You all right in there?" Earl rolled the window halfway down with stiff frozen hands. Cold air rushed instantly into the cab. "Truck died." Earl answered, "Figure I'll wait out the storm." The stranger glanced once toward the dark highway and then back at Earl. "No," he said quietly, "you won't." There was something calm in the way he said it, not rude, just certain. The stranger opened the truck door himself. "Come on!" Earl hesitated. Rusty did too. Then the stranger reached down and scratched the dog behind the ear. "You too," he said inside the Cadillac. The heater blasted warm air hard enough to fog the windows. Earl sat stiff in the passenger seat while Rusty curled beneath the dashboard, shaking from the cold. The stranger drove slowly toward Scottsbluff through snow thick enough to erase the road every few seconds. For a while neither man said much out in western Nebraska. Silence between men was common. Finally Earl looked sideways and asked, "You headed somewhere important?" The stranger smiled faintly without taking his eyes off the road. "Picture shoot in Wyoming." Earl nodded once. "That explains the car." The stranger laughed quietly at that. By the time they reached Scottsbluff, the storm had buried half the town under snow. The motel near the highway glowed dim yellow through the wind. Inside, the owner stood watching weather reports behind the counter. "Road west is closed till morning," he said. The stranger signed the register anyway, then looked toward Earl. "You got somewhere warm tonight?" Earl hesitated too long before answering. The stranger noticed immediately. Men like him always noticed things like that. "Truck's still out there," Earl admitted. "Guess? I'll figure something out." The stranger shook his head once. "No, you won't." He rented 2 rooms and paid cash before Earl could protest. The motel owner kept staring at the man while he signed the receipt. Then suddenly, his expression changed. "Well, I'll be damned," he whispered softly. Earl looked over. The stranger removed his gloves and finally took off his hat. The motel owner smiled wider. "Mr. Wayne, didn't expect to see you in Scottsbluff tonight." Earl blinked once, then looked again. At the tall man beside him, John Wayne gave the motel owner the kind of tired look that said he would rather the moment stay quiet. "Just need the rooms?" he answered. That night, the storm buried western Nebraska under nearly 3 feet of snow. County plows did not reach Route 92 until late the next morning. By then, Earl's truck was nearly invisible beneath the drifts. One deputy later admitted, "Another hour in that cab probably would have killed him." The Chevy got towed into town and repaired at a small garage beside the rail yard. John Wayne paid the bill before Earl even reached the shop. Didn't mention it either. Just folded the receipt into his coat pocket like it was nothing worth talking about. By afternoon, the roads west reopened. Outside the motel, Earl stood beside his repaired truck while Rusty chased snow through the parking lot. John Wayne carried one small leather bag toward his Cadillac. Earl finally cleared his throat. "Mr. Wayne." John Wayne stopped. Earl looked down once, before speaking again. Most people wouldn't have stopped. Wind pushed loose snow across the pavement between them. John Wayne shrugged lightly. "Storms don't care who you are," he said. Then he glanced toward Rusty, circling through the snow. "That dog kept you warm?" Earl nodded once. "Probably saved my life." John Wayne watched the dog another second. "Looks to me like maybe you saved each other." Then he held out his hand. Earl shook it. One farmer from Nebraska, one movie star from California, snow blowing sideways around both of them years later. Folks around Scottsbluff still told the story every winter, when storms rolled in across the plains. McGrew's feed store eventually closed. The motel changed owners twice. Route 92 widened sometime in the 70s, but Earl Bennett kept driving that same old Chevy for another 11 years. And every time winter storms swept across western Nebraska, somebody usually said the same thing sooner or later. Good thing John Wayne stopped that night. Earl died in 1970. Rusty outlived him by 3 years. They buried the dog beneath the cottonwoods behind the farmhouse overlooking the wheat fields. And if you drive west out of Scottsbluff after fresh snow, when the roads go quiet and the fields turn white all the way to the horizon, you can still understand why a man might stop for a stranded farmer during a Nebraska blizzard. Some places make that kind of thing feel natural, and some stories survive. Because decent men once decided not to keep driving,